Brennan live. So Brennan, we're ready. All right.
Bye, everybody.
Hi,
Thank you.
Brennan.
Yep, you're good. Here we go.
All right.
Go ahead.
At 7:01 p.m. Has there been a declaration of public notice?
Yes.
Great. Order of business. There are no public appearances today. And can I have a motion for the consent agenda?
I would
I'll
move
make-
approval of the consent agenda.
I second.
All right, roll call vote. Susan Manning,
Aye.
Eric,
Aye.
Andrew,
Aye.
Elizabeth.
Aye.
Lorene, aye. Ayes have it. Motion is carried. Next is recognitions.
Oh, I would just say recognitions. Tish did a nice job on those minutes. It was a great meeting and she did a nice job.
Okay, thank you. So Monona Grove High School senior Bailey Pat was awarded third place in the Skillsusa District 4 competition at Watertown High School. She competed in the prepared speech category. Senior Logan Soderholm also finished strong in the architectural design category of the Skillsusa competition last night. The Skillsusa regional competition is scheduled for late January. Glacial Drumlin School hosted their annual spelling bee this month, and the students did a fantastic job. The GDS champion is sixth grader Sydney Moyer, who qualified for the CISA 2 regional spelling bee in February. The runner-up was sixth grader B. Pauly, and there is a link with some photos to the competition. Congrats to the Monona Grove High School math team on their performance at the meet last week. Team made up of Patrick Clark, Ben Aubie, Kinkatron, Carter Ryan, Logan Aroe, and Joe Binsley all contributed to a third place finish out of 8 total teams. And some of our Monona Grove High School athletic teams have also found success this season. Boys swim is undefeated after their senior night win over DeForest, as well as other recent wins against Watertown and Waunakee. And for the first time in 3 years, the Monona Grove gymnastics team won a dual meet with a victory over Baraboo in January. And there are links to the articles with more information about the swim and gymnastics teams.
Great. Next are correspondence and announcements.
Doesn't seem like there's any.
Sorry. Yep, we have none this evening.
All right, our next are the administrative reports.
Okay, so they have an opportunity to have a little update with regard, of course, where we're at with our operating plan. And I think the most important thing, as far as what we've been working on, and since the last time we met 2 weeks ago, of course, is our attendance, our absences for both our staff and our students. We know that we started off the beginning of January following our break with, extreme number of absences, and it was really a challenge about whether we're able to have enough staff to keep schools open. I did attach a short report that shows the number of absences throughout the month for both teachers and students. On the teacher absences, that lists just the teachers that require subs. Of course, we have a lot of teachers that are specialists that are also equally important, but don't necessarily require a sub for the day. And so you see that first week and into the second, we peaked on January 7th with 32 teachers out. That was 11% of our staff. And we've been really encouraged about where our numbers have gone this last week and a half. And in fact, the last 2 days with 8 teachers out, that's about 3%. That is our normal absence rate pre-COVID. And so we're hoping that this is, stays that way. We know that we're not out of the woods yet, and it certainly could change, but certainly good news. And we're glad that our staff is healthy and most able to to be teaching. The student rates as well haven't come down quite as much as the staff attendance rates, but again, definitely a very positive trend there as well. And so again, that first week, we had the high on the January 7th of 625 students out. That was about 18% of our students. And now this last week, we've been yesterday down to 8%. Those are still higher than normal. So we've gone back. Tish has been tracking attendance for me. If you go back 2 years ago, pre-COVID, January, of course, is the cold and flu season, and we normally have our highest rates in January. In a typical January, we would have about 200 student absences, per day, which is about a 5 to 6% absence rate. So you see, we're getting closer to that, but we're still a lot more students out. So why don't I pause there? Does anyone have any questions about that data or anything with absences?
Elizabeth and then Peter.
Thanks, Dan. This is really helpful. Just a clarifying question around the student absences. This represents students absent for any reason, right? Not necessarily ones that are out specific to COVID or close contact.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification. That is correct. It's all absences.
Do we have any disaggregated data in terms of like COVID related versus other things?
We do have, and that's one of the priorities as far as the tracking with our health team. They are tracking separately all students with positive cases as well as students who are quarantined as close contacts. What we don't necessarily have a great tracking method is perhaps students who are out with symptoms but haven't tested positive, where there's kind of precautionary. So I think I could probably next time give some better data, at least with some estimates about how many of those might be COVID related, but we wouldn't have it exact.
Yeah, just to see kind of how the trends are tapering off. So thanks.
Sure.
Peter and then Eric.
My question was answered. Thank you.
Eric?
Are you going through the rest of the operation plan, Dan? Or is that pretty much just the overview that you're going to give? Because I want to wait. I don't want to ask you a question. You're going to answer it. So
yeah, I was going to talk a little bit about the operations plan, but I thought we'd start with just the attendance, piece.
Well, let me ask this question, and then if you get to it,
sure.
And I did. It's not really in the operation plan, but it's definitely fits within that. I'm just curious about. It doesn't really say anything specific about like teacher conferences and in-person teacher conferences and virtual teacher conferences. So I was just going to bring up where the district is at with that, because I think ideally it would be fantastic. We could have both options that would really make things more equitable for a lot of parents. And that might be something that I could envision would stay for a long time. So if you could touch on that when you get to it. And the other thing was with the parent drop off or the parents coming into the building. I would just want kind of an update of where we are with that too. So.
Sure. Yep, absolutely. Be glad to talk about both of those, and I can move right to that unless there's additional questions about attendance.
Andrew?
I don't know if it's more about attendance, about for substitute teaching. Are we on the list in case it gets out of hand where we need a lot of substitutes, the National Guard, and how would they play a role in substitute teaching? Do you have anything about that?
Yeah, it's a great question, and obviously that they've played a role in other areas. That's not something that we have as part of our plan that I'm not aware of that we would get that assistance.
I don't think they can. I know. Well, a lot of them are training at MATC right now for their CNA license. Yep. And they would have to do the same for substitute teaching too. So they would have to have the minimum license to do that. So I don't even know if the training would be possible, or if they already have people that could do it with a bachelor's degree or not. So, but
yeah, they have they got that emergency at the DPI. If you have a bachelor's degree, you can get the 3-year short-term sub. And in some cases, some of the short-term subs, like myself, I was put in emergency to do long-term sub because I had the year's experience. So that's why I'm pretty sure that that's what they're doing. I don't know if our school district is feeling any crunch in need of immediate substitutes. I know others around like Madison and some Prairians I just want to make sure that we were okay.
Yeah, absolutely. That absolutely is a tremendous need. We're just like everyone else. We're experiencing, the shortage, even pre-COVID. I mean, that as we know that the teacher and sub shortage have begun, but it is even more essential now. I will say this, that we did communicate with our families about what our situation was, and as you mentioned, to get a short-term sub license, there are a lot of people that are qualified for that, and we have had some of our parents and community members do that and go through that process to be short-term subs. So we certainly appreciate that, and that's something that will be an ongoing effort to try to continue to expand our sub pool.
Thank you. Susan Manning?
Yeah, Dan, would you kind of look for a pathway to put information out into the community, whether through the Herald or whatever, about if there was, what the qualifications are for a short-term sub and what you would have to do, and who they would contact. So all they'd have to do is look at, and put it on the web page. Is it on the web page? I mean, again, I think this is really good, helpful information. And I'm amazed at how many people might be interested who have already done a lot of work in the school district or might be willing to come back. So I guess what I'm looking for is information about the processes you're currently using, whether or not you're trying to contact retired people to bring them back, and whether or not you're putting out information for training for substitutes. And then the third question is, do we know what the process is for involving the National Guard? Because I know they are doing the training. We have a National Guard facility here in Madison with links. So I'm kind of looking at 3 questions, I think. Maybe 2 you've answered, but.
Yeah. So with regard to substitutes, as you know, we contract with a service called Teachers on Call for our substitute teachers. So we have links on our website specifically to their application process. And so that's one piece of it. And then there also is information about, you have to have, of course, a license in order to be a substitute teacher. And so there's links to that. That's all on the DPI website, all the information there. And then, of course, we always direct anyone to our HR team that are always willing to answer questions and walk people through, any questions that they might have. But we do have those direct links accessible for people that are interested. And
could you put that up on the web so people, how Katie does those little letters? It could, on that front page of the web, it could say, if you're interested in substitute teaching in the district, and then just put the links in, because a lot of people would not know to go look at DPI. I mean,
yeah,
that would be great. That'd be great.
Okay. And then the final piece, as I mentioned, I really am not familiar at all with any potential thing with regard to the National Guard, but again, as was already, as kind of mentioned, that any able-bodied person that is willing to, and eligible to be a substitute, of course, all options are out there and welcome, these days.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, why don't I just speak briefly a little bit about some of the day-to-day operations, a couple of things that Eric mentioned. And so we started having conversation. As you know, we started the year, we did all virtual conferences for the fall conferences. And then we were having conversations in November and into December about, okay, what are we going to do in the spring conferences? And things were looking a lot better then. And are we going to, go back to all in person? And part of the conversation was that, one of the real positives with the virtual is the flexibility it provided and more convenient for a lot of our parents. And so we had that exact conversation about, well, is there some way we can provide choice, for that? And so that's what we were exploring. And then as we get into January, and of course our case numbers, skyrocketed. We did meet to make a decision by early January because the elementary conferences were coming up soon. So we decided, okay, let's stick with the virtual conferences. But we are making a little bit of an adjustment. Traditionally, conferences are always held on 2 evenings. And, we have the, 4-hour blocks each of those evenings. Well, with virtually, there's no reason that they have to be on those tight, blocks. And so every teacher has a little bit more flexibility. We've just asked to, you have basically a 2-week window, and to be accommodating, what might work best for teachers and parents as to when they have those conferences. It could even be during, normal school hours, during prep time, if a teacher would like to do that. But really and so the individual teachers are in the process of scheduling with their parents, during that window. And I will say we still do have some in-person meetings. As we still have regular IEP meetings for students with IEPs, and with those meetings, we do give parents a choice. The vast majority are choosing the virtual option, again, for convenience and so on. But there are some that prefer to be in person, and we make those arrangements. So I think moving forward, absolutely, that I see a real potential for a lot of flexibility and perhaps some sort of combined method, in the future with that.
Go ahead, Susan. I'll go after you.
Oh, I think it's similar to Eric's question, but I think it's just step 2, and that is so your thoughts are you're going to try and proceed to choice. Is that correct? At some time.
Well, we'll continue that conversation,
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And then if a parent felt a need without a special education student or on a particular plan to meet with a teacher during the conference period, are there any means for that at this time, or is that still in the exploration stage?
Yeah, I would just say in general, any parent, in discussing their child's needs, absolutely, they should be reaching out to the teacher and or principal about what type of communications, and there are times that we're having it where it makes sense that we're able to do in-person meetings. So it's just a matter of reaching out and communicating with the staff.
Thank you,
Eric.
Dan, I'm speaking for myself, but I would like to maybe, we all know that things change now. We could make plans and they could change in a moment's notice. I understand that. I think we all understand that. But I'd at least like to maybe see a plan of having that option for the next conferences. I don't know if those land in April, or I don't know when that time is. But that way we have something, maybe a plan to go to that. And then, obviously, if the numbers are up and we have to change it, we have to make changes. I think people will understand that. But, I can speak for myself and my wife. We'd love to have an in-person conference. I know I've speak to a number of constituents that would like to have the same. I've also spoke to some that like the virtual option. So I think it would really be great to, at least have a goal to get to that for the next round of conferences, if that's possible. Yeah. And then with the idea that if the numbers are there, we go back to, where we are now. So. Yeah.
I have a question too. So volunteers, do we currently allow volunteers to work in the building? And if so, how are they determined to be volunteers?
Sure. Yep. So volunteers follow the same rules as employees. And so, as one of the things that even in non-COVID times, depending on what they're doing as volunteers and whether they're, what their access is to students. But if that is the case, then they go through the criminal background checks and that stuff as well to be approved first. And then since we do have our employee policy with regard to vaccinations, we are carrying that through for volunteers as well. So it's up to the schools. They have been given the principals have the authority that can bring in volunteers on an as needed basis. And so everything is scheduled individually through the schools with and the teachers. So there's not a district-wide volunteer, policy or practice. It's up to the individual buildings, how they utilize them.
Thank you. Susan Manning.
Do we have any input from the staff about their feeling about going back to in-person conferences? Have we, I mean, again, what we want to do is have a comfort level here. They're in the classes with the kids, but this is increased exposure. So I just wondered,
I mean, sure, the principals absolutely have that communication with teachers, and that's part of the thing when we talk about long term. You know, that's why I'm a little bit hesitant to say, oh, this is what it's going to look like, because I'm not going to make, you know, that's absolutely has to be a collaborative process, and teacher voice has to be part of that as well. So that would be all part of the planning.
Thank you. Susan Fox?
Yeah, I just wanted to say I would be supportive too of looking into a way to offer the choice more broadly, at least but for the last elementary conferences. Maybe the high school ones I think are early March, the middle school are late February, maybe even for those, but have that conversation. Just because I think we've talked a lot about student mental health and staff mental health. There's also parent mental health, and there's still our parents who are sort of anxious because it's just such a, it's like, it's different for everybody. And there is a different dynamic when you get to go in the classroom and look around, see the teacher face to face. So I think there's value in that. At the same time, I appreciate that we're trying to balance everybody's concern at this point. But I thought, someone raised the question of what numbers would we look at? In other words, how much better would it have to get before we would consider that? And I think, as you say, I think a lot of parents would still appreciate the virtual. So I wouldn't like us to get rid of that. And I agree with Eric that I think that might be a long-term plan for future years as well, just because it really is easier for a lot of people. We talk about one of the barriers to getting parents to teacher, and we have a very good track record in our district, but it falls off slightly as kids get older. And I think one of the barriers is jobs, childcare, all that stuff. So if they could do it virtually, that'd be great. But anyway, so yeah, I'd encourage that conversation to continue.
I would also encourage that to having a plan of having those options of either virtual or in person. Elizabeth?
Yeah, I agree. And this conversation in some ways is reminiscent to me, or what comes up to me is kind of similar feelings around when last year we were talking about going back in person, right? And this idea of when and how to prepare and those kinds of things. And I think for me, Dan, more than just encourage, I would like us to see make some actual movement around like, what does titrating down from some of these things look like, right? Like let's operationalize some of things a little bit, put some rules around it. And to Eric's point, right? If we don't hit it, we don't hit it. If it changes, it can change. But I feel like if we learned anything from last year, it's like the more that we can include staff and prepare staff in like this future planning of, eventually COVID will be endemic instead of pandemic, and it's here, and we need to think about what our policies and practices are sort of moving into that space. And to me, similar to the reopening conversation, now is the time to start having those conversations, even if nothing in our practices change for the rest of the school year. At least we've moved in the pathway of starting to socialize folks to the fact that, hybrid conferences may be here to stay, for example.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Okay, so yeah, I appreciate that. Absolutely, and there's no question, that I think now is the time to have those conversations as we're in the midst of it. The one thing I want to clarify, I think there might be a little bit of confusion about the schedule. We have 2 sets of conferences a year. The elementary conferences are coming up in 2 weeks. That's it. There aren't any additional ones later in the spring. So we're planning for next school year.
Okay.
Yeah.
But they're different for elementary, middle, and high school, though, Dan, right? The time.
No, all the way K-12. As far as the actual dates of the conferences, yes.
Yes.
The middle school and high school occur a little bit later.
Right. Yeah. So,
yeah.
I mean, I guess that's maybe what I was thinking of. But.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. So does not appear to be any other questions. All right. We can move on to board reports. Ad hoc Sustainability Committee. Peter?
Thank you. We last met last Thursday. The topic, one of the, first of all, update on the schedule on February 28th and the first week of March, we're going to have people in the high school who are going to be starting to put solar panels on the roof. The project, yeah, exactly. They hope to turn they're scheduled, weather permitting, knock on wood, all of that stuff. They're scheduled to energize the array on the 15th or so of May, 15th to 17th of May, and sort of finish up, complete the project by July, or sorry, by July. With all the details. So we're excited about that. That is moving forward. As part of this, and as part of what we're planning to do, and I've mentioned this before, but some members of the State Sustainability Committee are going to be appearing tomorrow morning at the Renew Conference at Monona Terrace, where we're going to be talking about this project. But what we're really going to be talking about is, for the audience, is our experience in getting what we did to get our school district to move, to go this route, to get where we are. And to provide that information. It's part of our outreach, provide that information so other people can build on it, figure out how to get their school districts, work with their school districts to get them going on. One of the slides, points out there are 2,000 school buildings in Wisconsin. They're the center of communities everywhere in the state. They impact everybody. They're of public interest. And they're all looking to save money. They all have, not all of them, but most of them have flat roofs. And they could all benefit. They're a natural place for expanding clean energy in the state, and both for improving its acceptance and for increasing penetration. And so we're hoping to give people information that they can work with, they can use to based on our experience, to bring clean energy to their community and benefit their schools. So that's the plan. We're putting the finishing touches on the presentation. I've got a few more slides coming, and when that happens, I will forward that to you. So that's that. We're going to meet again, I think next Thursday. So there we are. Questions? Susan?
Susan?
Yeah, not so much a question as I was going to ask if you'd share the slides. I guess because this is a board committee, I don't recall ever being informed about this conference. In fact, the McKinstry people were surprised. They didn't know about it until they saw you guys on the agenda. So I just think in the future, because it's a board committee, it would be helpful to have the whole board know, because it's possible some of us might have liked to attend it. But at the very least, I'll appreciate seeing the slides.
You can say, it is a conference you have to register for, and it's
right.
expensive. But
that's what I'm saying. That's my point.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Actually, you can still register for it, but I believe that I have mentioned this before, but I haven't given a lot of details. That's certainly true, but we've been working on it, and this is our first sort of outreach opportunity, first big outreach opportunity, and it is kind of inside baseball. These are folks who are all, they're all interested and engaged in Dane County in the clean energy program. So it's we don't have to sell this to the audience, but we hope to arm the audience.
Thank you. Elizabeth?
Yeah, I think it's great outreach. I agree with Susan. I also, maybe you have mentioned it, Peter, so I'll give you the benefit of the doubt, but I certainly don't have a recollection of it being mentioned.
Sure.
So we'll just leave that there.
Right.
Question for you, actually, but I do think it's great. Publicly, I think it's great movement building. I think it positions us in a really good way. So I think that's awesome. Question not about the Renew conference, but around the solar panels. So if I'm remembering right, we were delayed because of supply chain issues and some other things. Is there any implications around to our grant or any of those things because of that delay? Or are we still kind of
No, we did have to. We did have to talk to the Public Service Commission about the timing and so on, because there was a 1-year performance guarantee requirement, but that's been worked out. So there's not any implications.
Cool.
That's
Thanks.
a good question, because I was worried about it too when the delay came up. It's like, oh my God, we're going to lose the grant. Well, they were happy to work with us on it.
Good. Great. Thanks.
Susan Manning? Susan?
Lorraine, I think the other thing that would be great, again, I was surprised because I was having the same experience with Susan. when
I'm
McKinstry
sorry.
was talking to us about the workshop. And I actually sit in on as many of the committee meetings, because they are really good meetings, as I can. And I was unaware. Again, I think this is a great opportunity to also, normally we could get Will and media to tape this and then be able to connect it to the district website so people can see it.
Well, it's the property of the conference folks. So we wouldn't be free to do that.
But again, you
Have to
could
work with
ask them. Usually they love to have that kind of exposure, but that's up to
That's
you.
right.
But you could also redo it with Will and the student group in a way that the district could also see it. Again, I think this is a great opportunity. You put a lot of work into this. You could do some modifications and still put this forward. I would encourage that kind of communication. I mean, I'm talking to Jill Underly in front of the solar exhibits, and I talked to her about our solar panels and the committee and how great they've been. And she said, I would love to come to the ribbon cutting. And so I think it's that the community would really like to know more about this. And that was one of the things your committee was looking at. So I just saw it as an opportunity, and whatever works is fine.
Right. On that line, there's this month or next month newsletters for those schools will have an article about it. There's announcements scheduled planned at the high school. Obviously, they're the first to know because they'll be they're impacted. And we are also planning a press release for the paper and some other outreach opportunities. And sort of the next thing I've been working on this presentation. So the next thing we want to talk about is doing what we call a ribbon cutting ceremony or event. The schedule would say if we want to avoid graduation, we want to do it while school is still in session, then maybe the weekend of the 16th, but we have a lot to consider before we get that. We have to discuss that with Mitch especially. And Dan to talk about what we can do, but there will be some significant. There's a significant structure, and we should spend a little time talking about it and publicizing it within the district.
All right, thank you, Peter. All right. All right. Next is the state education convention. Susan Fox. Oh, you're on mute.
Interestingly, one of the main ones I had signed up for was canceled, and then I started looking through the list. A few were canceled, and I wasn't. Is this going to be? It was one of the best conferences I've been to, I have to say. I don't know what that was about. It was just the sessions were really applicable to what we're talking about and working on. Maybe it was having somewhat fewer people there due to the fact that we had just more good conversations outside of the sessions as well, due to the requirement for a vaccine. That clearly limited. There were still a couple thousand people there, but I mean, not as many as usual. Anyway, I went to some great sessions. One on creating and sustaining a mental health advisory committee that was out of New Berlin, and they just had some really interesting tips. I've already talked to Dan a little bit about this, but just some contacts that we might be able to make, and it might not be an extra thing that we would do, but just provide some extra resources that were very impressive. They have had applied for some grants where they were able to actually bring a mental health professional into the building. And they were talking about how important that is to have that on site, because the kids can, you create a space in the guidance area, something where kids go in and out of anyway. And so there's more privacy, and students are more willing to seek out, parents are more willing to have their kids seek out assistance. So, I mean, there's just a lot of interesting things they were doing. Sort of not dissimilar, I went to one on trauma sensitivity in the classroom, which was probably more suited to teachers, but very interesting about how widespread how so many people have had some level of trauma in their lives, and some of us just kind of roll forward and deal with it. Others, it's more serious, and just ways of being aware of kids' behavior all the time, of not going first to stop the behavior or punish the student right away, but really taking the time to figure out, okay, what's going on underneath. And also the fact that you can't always do that right when the student's in the middle of something, because they don't want to talk to you at that point. They don't want to tell you, but just a lot of, again, interesting resources for teachers and just interesting thing to listen to. And then a couple on equity in the community. A lot, interestingly, when the last one was Fond du Lac, and they're doing all the same things we are. And I'd say they're not quite as far along as we are in terms of revamping their hiring processes and that kind of thing. But one thing I felt like they were doing a better job of, and I'd like to have more conversation with us about it, maybe even Elizabeth through your TLE committee, I'm not sure, but just because the city of Monona is embarking on some discussion groups, they've done some book studies, and I'm not sure whether Cottage Grove is, but it seems like we're all, a lot of us are working on similar things, and there maybe should be more connection built in was part of my takeaway. And then another interesting one, well, two on legislative updates, interesting, a little depressing, with, some point that, for example, the bill that's in the Senate today, and I forget what the status actually is, but about not allowing the teaching of racism or implicit bias in school. Some of those kinds of things, and even about guns and some various other ones, are partially about messaging as well. Clearly they'll be vetoed, but the politics enter in, and it's a thing that one party can use against the other come election time. So some of it's that, but the funding certainly does not look, it looks grim. And so it wasn't particularly uplifting, but it was just more the need to stay in touch and on top of what's going on. Another one on free speech, and the interesting thing there was the new decision, which related to student behavior out of school. So it's like another test to consider. So that was also interesting. Lots of good things. Great keynotes. I'll let somebody else talk about that.
One that stood out for me was the Greendale School District talked about diversity and increasing diversity with staff and making sure that their students feel welcome. So they kind of did some similar things that we did in our district. They worked with an organization to kind of change the interviewing techniques, and some of the questions they felt were kind of biased. So they kind of changed those questions, and it made a difference. So slowly they're seeing a gradual change in diversity in their staff. And then they're also doing a kind of like a pilot program to ensure that their staff feel welcome. So it seems like the changes are going really well with them, and they're still, working on that process. But I just thought it was really interesting and kind of similar to the things that we're doing in our district. Susan Manning or Andrew, did you have anything to share?
Yeah, I was going to share on the delegate side. On the delegation, all 10 resolutions passed. The one that I was really concerned about that wouldn't pass was the creating a curriculum for the AAPI. After much debate, and I actually got up and spoke on it as well. And I guess it was moving because I got an ovation, that was pretty cool. And it passed, and I've been getting some flooded emails of thanking me in behalf of our school board of wanting this to happen. And so that was really great, and I'm glad that all of the resolutions did pass. Then the next one I went to, because a couple of them that I wanted to go was canceled. I stopped in one about leadership, hiring great leadership. And this was about the board members and the leadership down at Belmont. They had an issue where their superintendent had quit a month before school had started because of the mental and physical attacks, not just on the leadership, but also on the school board. And so some of the school board members had left as well. So they were talking about how to how they found great leadership when they were hiring, talking about the issues, about diversity and inclusion. And I mean, it was really interesting. And so they are back on their feet, and the school district is back on striving again. But they always said that no matter what, you just make sure you let the community know that we're not in we're not in this for the big bucks. We care just like the community, and the community always have an opportunity to run for a school board, just like principals have an opportunity to get their license to become superintendents. So that was very, very interesting. And I enjoyed that part too, and talked with a few of the board members and the leadership from Belmont, which was great afterwards.
Thank you, Andrew. Susan?
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I've been going to these workshops for quite a while, and this was one of the, I mean, there were so many great choices, and then there was not one single workshop I went to that didn't have great learning opportunities. So I did go to the, my workshop was also canceled on Tuesday, but there were still 2 available. And this one was navigating discussions when the stakes are high, which is, again, things that we're as a board doing all the time. And it was really good. And Cheryl Stinsky, who's from WSB, was one of the main leaders, and she did an excellent job. Again, if we need somebody to talk about that, she's a great resource. She talked about providing understanding of what gets in the way of cooperative relations. She talked about learning about constructive dialogue. And then her high tip for navigating discussions when the stakes are high are respect is critical. And, you know, not that we don't all know that, but she made us go through some exercises which made you do it, show that you could do it, and encourage you, once you showed you could do it, to use that method. Then on Wednesday, I did want to mention from 8 to 9, and I wasn't aware of this. I hadn't looked carefully enough at the program. But Susan and I kind of turned around, and there's Reed Foster in Milwaukee, and they were actually doing a presentation on engaging students in the building design process. And Dan was there, and Jared was there, and Reed was there, and then Megan from EAU. And they also had they tried to get students there, but it was too difficult during the day. But Madison actually brought 2. And I heard good reviews of that program, so I want to thank the staff for doing that. And then I also attended the Creating and Sustaining a Mental Health Advisory Committee, which was absolutely excellent. And we've already gotten feedback linking us to other resources from the people that were there. It was New Berlin. One of the things they talked about on this committee, and again, we've got Elizabeth here who has experience in putting these things together. They actually included parents, community mental health providers, school district psychologists, social worker, and administrators. And then they put this package into their strategic plan with a focus on social emotional well-being of all students and staff. And then proceeded with looking at grant funding, which was really good. The general session was absolutely excellent. Ravi has a book called Pivot, and the whole idea is empowering students to succeed in an unpredictable tomorrow. And he did a great job of presenting that. Then the legislative update from John Forrester, which was the School Administrators Alliance. The quote that's most memorable from that is, if you want me to, I can actually scan in his handout and put it out to other board members. It lists, but I'm guessing at some point Susan will give a report. It listed all the probably 10 or 15 bills and kind of where they stood on them. And he said, quote unquote, deteriorating political environment for public education, unquote. Then I also went to Myths About Learning We Need to Abandon, and that was taught by Jim Rickabaugh. I think some of you have seen him before. It was absolutely excellent. 8 myths dispelled by research, which still persist in the classroom. It's really well done. I also went to The Role of Equity and Continuous Improvement by Greendale. Again, the thought being understand the problem, use data metrics, and use your plan, do, study, act. Focus on improvement in narrowing discrepancies and outcomes for students of color and students who qualify for free and reduced lunch. And again, looking at that as part of the strategic plan. Data governance for effective data use. That was Elmbrook. Again, excellent. Organizational strategy, focus on goal setting and progress evaluation. They have, and Dan, I think we must have, is Jared on? Something related to this. They have a data hub, and they can actually look at data for the whole district and then click on it and look at every single school and then click on it and look at every single class and then click on it and look at the student. So if you see a whole bunch of absences somewhere, you can really see where that's coming from. I mean, it was really interesting, and a great tool. And I also went to the free speech Tinker Arrow, which was very helpful because we'd worked on that policy. Then, and I'm surprised you guys didn't mention it. This is incredible. So if you have the opportunity to watch the taped video of the general session from 3 to 5 on Friday, watch the Chippewa Falls Wire Choir. So these were students playing string instruments while they danced. One of them actually,
orchestral show choir, sort of.
Yeah. One of them
cool.
actually playing the violin, sitting on the shoulders of was he playing a cello or a viola? Or,
cello, I think.
Yeah. I mean, it was. It's very uplifting if you just want a good feeling about things. This is absolutely amazing. And then Brandon Fleming spoke. He and I do have the book. After I read it, I can make it available to you. The book is called Miseducated. It's one word, Miseducated. And it's a story of a Black man who, quote, hates school. And in this particular case, there was a teacher who made a difference in his struggle and success. But he ended up, I mean, he hated school. He felt like people hated him. His 3 takeaways were our willingness to meet people where they are. Young people cannot dream what they cannot see. And love is what changed me, empathy. But the thought about he talks, the thread that goes through there is young people cannot dream what they cannot see. And he is now an assistant debate coach at Harvard University. Then WSB did the legislative update, wrap around equity, arms around the community. The one thing I would add to the things that Susan said were, again, the development of meaningful partnerships, including leadership teams, and we've done some of that. But they actually formed a Community Equity Ally Academy and a humanity project, a community dialogue series about the history of racism, and used book clubs. And then Governor Evers came on, and Craig Council, who's the manager of the Milwaukee Brewers. And actually, you know, when I went back and looked at all this, it was an incredibly intensive 3.5 days with great programs, many people that would be great resources to us, just in discussion, because a lot of this we've done. So thank you.
Just
Fox?
kind of one more comment. Yeah, on the legislative thing, I think one of the takeaways from that was, you know, and again, in our area, we have legislators who are supportive of public schools, but that public education and funding resources for public education should be a question asked of literally every candidate running for every seat throughout the state. So if you have relatives in other parts of the state, because this, he said, not only is it a bad environment for public education, is it deteriorating? It's the worst he's seen it in the last couple of decades. So it's just very important. The other thing I want to say is talking to board members from other districts about their experiences during this COVID time and the attacks they've received, it was pretty eye-opening. I mean, you read about it in the paper, but when you're talking to people who have it going on all the time, may be grateful for, one, the fact that we're kind of all on the same page, so it makes it easier for us to think through these things and we all do our homework, but grateful for our community as well, that when there have been differences of opinion, people contact us, but by and large, it's been pretty civil, and, we explain where we're coming from, they tell us where they're coming from, and, not everybody's always happy, but we just haven't faced everybody's, again, it's civil discourse is very important, and I feel like for the most part, we have that in our community. I'm grateful for that.
Well, and Andrew, that the Belmont workshop you went to, not only had the superintendent left, but didn't 2 board members quit right after that? So, I mean, and I don't know what the size of their board is, but I think there were quite a few people who discussed leaving. A great leadership school board member who's going to retire this year. It's been a very challenging time for people.
Thank you, Susan. All right. No other comments? Okay, we'll move on to possible. Oh, Peter.
Laura, just a second. I would note that actually after the convention, there was an estimate of the state budget, which did show an almost $3 billion more revenue than anticipated. And I know that there's politics and so on, but it does shift the forecast is for $3 billion more in state revenues. That does help shift the argument in the right direction. And hopefully that there's a little bit more that can be done.
Well, and it's been clear that the state has the money. It's just the will to put it.
Well, now the state has
more even more. Now they've got even more. They had it at the time they did our funding, but they've got even more now. So
that's exactly right. Yeah.
Yep.
Moving on to possible action items. First is the policy revision, second reading.
So again, I don't know, Dan, if you just want to bring that forward, but this is the second reading on the 5113, which basically provides clarity to the open enrollment policy. And these changes came from administration. It's already what we do, but they wanted to make sure it was very clear as people are reading our open enrollment policy, how that piece, particularly with siblings, works. And we reviewed it and felt good about it and have brought it to you.
Okay, Susan Fox. Hope you're on mute.
I still am. Okay. I would move approval of policy 5113 as presented.
Second.
Any further discussion? All right, moving to roll call vote. Susan Manning.
Aye.
Eric.
Aye.
Andrew.
Aye.
Elizabeth.
Aye.
Susan Fox.
Aye.
Peter.
Aye.
Lorraine. Aye. Ayes have it. Motion is carried. All right, next is the 2022-2023 open enrollment recommendations.
Aaron, might as well take it away.
All right, Dan. So if you recall, at the last board meeting, we gave a preliminary number and showed you what we were thinking. From that change, we had originally requested 10 spots at the freshman level based on conversation and looking at how MG21 Middle Campus has come online, and we're starting to see students get accepted at that level, and it's not necessarily changing what's happening at the freshman level. In addition to that, we have our private schools that start funneling in. So based on that conversation with Principal McGrath, we decided to remove those 10 spots and open up no spots at this point at the high school level. Please note that we do have the ability to come back later on and add additional spots if we see our enrollment tracking lower than what we're projecting. So for regular open enrollment, we're looking at 143 spots district-wide. And then the other part that was added from our preliminary recommendation is we are required to indicate the number of IEP-driven services. So in partnership with our Director of Student Services, Krista Foster, and I also attached that for the board members' review as the worksheet that she walks through to determine, similar to what we do for class size in our regular education. So right now we have about 15 spots for special education, which all fall within that speech and language side of things. That 15 spots are not in addition to the 143 spots. They are actually within. So when we go through the process of placing students, all students are randomly drawn. So as we go through that, if the family has indicated they have an IEP and that IEP states that they have speech and language, if they are drawn in the first 5 categories at the grade level, 5 at the middle school level, or 5 at the early childhood level, those kids then get in. If we do have more than 5, then those individuals will go on a waiting list. So we do have a couple of different lists that we have to maintain. But the 15 IEP-driven services around speech and language is not in addition to our 143. And these are new seats. So they're with the policy that you just approved. If there are any siblings that apply for students that are already attending, if they apply in areas where we have seats, those siblings count towards the open seats. If they apply to grades that we do not have any seats, then they're automatically accepted. Any questions? And I know Krista's here if you have any questions regarding the IEP side of things.
Elizabeth?
Sorry, I was like clicking and I wasn't responding. 2 questions. One is a policy implication question that I didn't really actually think about until right now that I want to ask. And then the second one, and Jared, I know I asked you this last year too, but if you or Krista could explain like the number of spaces available for explicit IEP services again, because I just like, I don't know why, but it does not hit my brain. But first, the policy question. So last year we amended our open enrollment policy, right, to include sibling. I don't know that we ever discussed the implications or unintended consequences around that as it relates to students who are identified as needing special education and related services. So I just want to check. So if I'm a student and I'm in and I have a sibling, they're in regardless of their special education status, correct?
With the change.
With the change in our policy.
If the sibling is currently attending.
Yes.
And you apply and you maybe didn't get in last year, or weren't age eligible last year, you apply this time.
Yeah.
Then you're in regardless of your status. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Chris. I just want to confirm that because we never actually walked down that path. And as my policy colleagues know, I like to walk down all the paths. All right. Please explain to me again the 5 IEP driven services that are specific to speech and language, but we have 0 on everything else, because it's always confusing to me. Thank you.
Like
in advance.
how, yeah. So sort of like what we have to consider.
Why? Like,
yeah.
Why do they have 5? And like things like OT have 0 when we clearly have kids that have OT services, right? It's all very confusing to me.
So this would be like the analysis that we do like on our team is to take a look at who do we currently have? What do our same as the typical like spot, but like what is it looking like for next year in terms of caseload size, our staffing, related services, and then I look at like a number of things, including just the numbers of students on current caseloads, and then we roll them up. So like we take a best guess, right? Things obviously change from January, but we roll those up and look at the new caseloads assigned in buildings of students and what is the capacity to take on additional students without adding to our staff. Some of these like are like where we have contracted services where we're basically paying for the service. We have no capacity to add without paying for more service, right? So like those are some easy ones where we have, for example, deaf, hard of hearing or vision, like those are contracted and there's no way to have capacity for more students without an additional, sort of burden on the district, right? I guess just one thing I want to mention as far as the cross-categorical piece is, I'm not sure if everyone is aware, but our caseloads across the board with transfer students in, some siblings, for example, have gotten into open enrollment, but basically just our resident student population has increased. We have some of the highest elementary caseload sizes that we've ever had currently. So that's just a big factor this year. We usually have a handful of spaces available. And then I think it is fair to consider what we've had to manage with staffing and our SEA staffing and where we've had to add and why we've had to add and sort of the impacts on special education of the last couple of years. So we did end up, and also just like, right, so who are our current students and what are their needs? And that leaves us with a pretty limited capacity in every area next year. And with speech language, we do have just a little bit of wiggle room at those different levels to serve some students with those speech and language needs based on sort of our, similar to class size, we have goals and a range for caseload size, and we incorporate a weighting process into that. So it's not just like numbers of students, but sort of what are the needs of our current students and what is their, weight, loosely termed. DPI provides some guidance on that, and we use that with some of our own modifications to make it more meaningful. And that's how we identify across the board at each level, elementary, middle, and high school, what services we would have the capacity to add students in without having that burden or shifting our staffing and resource allocation.
So can I just walk through a practical example so I feel like I fully understand it, and then I promise I won't take up any more time on this. But so let's say we have 47 regular education open spots in 4K, right? I'm a person, a child, happens to have, developmental delay, IEP eligibility. In addition to speech language services, I have special education services, I have OT. That person, we don't have capacity for.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. So speech language only.
Right. Yeah. We try to get away from that language too.
I know. I know, but Krista, you and I you are the old school.
Services for speech and language. We do have the capacity to take some students at that level.
Great. Thank you.
All right, can I have a motion, please?
I move to approval open enrollment seats for 2022, 2023 as presented.
I'll second that.
Okay, any further discussion? Roll call vote. Susan Manning,
Aye.
Eric,
Aye.
Andrew.
Aye.
Elizabeth.
Aye.
Susan. Fox.
Aye.
Peter.
Aye.
Lorraine. Aye. Ayes have it. Motion is carried. All right, next is the Wrestling Cooperative Team Sponsorship Agreement between Monona Grove and McFarland Schools for 2022 and 2023, and 2023 and 2024.
Just want to confirm that this is a renewal. We've had this existing relationship or co-op with McFarland for a number of years. And so every 2 years, the agreement needs to be renewed. You had just done a similar one for our girls hockey program at the previous board meeting.
Okay, Andrew.
I move approval of WIAA Wrestling Cooperative Agreement between Monona Grove and McFarland Schools for 2022, 2023, and 2023, 2024 is presented.
Second.
Any further discussion? Okay. Roll call vote. Susan Manning,
Aye.
Eric,
Aye.
Andrew,
Aye.
Elizabeth.
Aye.
Susan Fox.
Aye.
Peter.
Aye.
Lorraine. Aye. Ayes have it. Motion is carried. Next is the Teacher and Support Staff Handbook Revision Section 8.06 COVID-19 leave.
Okay, I'll give you a little bit of background on this, and then Nicole is available as well to answer any specific questions, about the policy and how it would, be incorporated. So as you know, the board adopted a policy, back in August of 2020. At that time, of course, things were very different than they are now. And at the time, we were concerned about that we would be requiring staff to quarantine, and where it was of no fault of their own. And we thought it would make sense that we would have additional district paid leave time, in those situations. Now fast forward here, a year and a half later, we're in a very different circumstance. So that policy is still on the books, but we really are not seeing that it's being utilized or really applicable to our current situation. What we do know, as you know, this year, and especially more recently, and that gets the timing of this, is that we've had a lot of staff members who have had to be out on leave because they've either themselves have been tested positive with COVID, or they've had to quarantine as close contacts either at school or with family members or wherever. And it is an extra burden. We know that we have sick leave that's available. That's really important, for teachers for a variety of things. But this, of course, is an extreme circumstance, and we're seeing a need for a lot more leave than normal, or the use of that. So that's kind of the background and the rationale that why at this time we think it's time to revise that leave policy that is more current with our current situation. And so Nicole drafted, the language. And before we open it for questions, Nicole, anything you'd like to add or correct that I said?
I think it was all correct. And our original language also was trying to fill that gap where that FFCRA leave did not cover. So that Federal Coronavirus Response Act provided some relief to individuals in the district, but then it didn't provide that relief for individuals who are exposed at work and required to quarantine. So we're trying to fill that gap originally with that leave. And now with the vaccine mandate and such the high rate, of course, that we have of staff who are vaccinated, if you are, contact boosted, whatever, you're not even required to do that quarantine necessarily if you're not exhibiting symptoms. And so this leave is a lot more expansive to cover individuals who are in so many different situations and being impacted by COVID-19.
Susan Fox?
This makes good sense to me, and I appreciate that it's written retroactively and also to be in place through June 30th. I think that's good. My question is really about the number of days. I had a brief conversation with Dan about the 5 days, and I know that it's if you have COVID, I think that it's a 5-day expected quarantine, and then if you don't have symptoms, you just mask for the next. So that part. But when we have younger teachers who have kids of their own, and maybe COVID's going through their family, which happens sometimes, 5 days. And I know teachers do get 10 days, so they get a fair amount of sick leave, but that's for all the normal sick leave and the normal colds and flu and everything that happens, as well as this particular time. So I guess my question is, would we give some thought maybe to making it 10 days, or I'm not sure what the implication of that would be, but just it's just another number. I mean, I'm not sure what the right number is. I guess I'd be interested to hear what other people think about that.
Elizabeth, and then Susan Manning.
Yeah, I agree with Susan. I had the same question. So I'd be curious to know from you, Nicole, how the calculus between 5 non-cumulative came. Because obviously there's a point in which the burden on the district is high, right? Where we have to find subs to replace and those kinds of things. And I agree with Susan Fox. So in a world where you have more than one child, potentially 5 non-cumulative days could really get eaten up fast and quick. And so I'm just kind of curious, what went into that calculus, and is there is there room for us to move up without putting in, too tough of a burden on us to be able to fill those positions?
So Nicole, I'll let you answer those questions, and then Susan Manning.
Those are good questions. And, we're just really trying to strike a balance of providing an amount of leave that is meaningful and helpful to staff, but then also we do have obviously education to provide to our students, and we want staff in the classroom if they're, well and able to be there. And I think we realized that we also offer 11 sick leave days per year in addition to 2 personal leave days. And then if we add an additional 5 days, that is 18 days of paid leave this year. And out of 185 work days, that is about 10% of the leave days. That being said, though, we do recognize that there is an added burden, especially for staff who do have young children and children who are unable to be vaccinated, who are under 5 years of age. And so they're the ones who are probably even more impacted potentially. So like I said, we're just trying to find a good balance, but I don't know that we have a perfect solution. We thought 5 seemed meaningful.
Thank you. Susan Manning?
I also would support adding additional days to the 5 days. Realistically, if you're a teacher and you have exposure, direct exposure, and you're quarantined for 5 days, and you have a child at home who also during that time comes home with COVID, that adds additional days and you're out of your 5 days. And then in addition, if the teacher gets COVID, that could add another 4 or 5 days. So I think realistically, if you look at once you have that exposure with the potential now with the Omicron virus for infection being as high as it is, if that changes, we can always change these days. But right now, the virulence of the Omicron is so high. I don't know that there's anyone right here, even if we can't see their face, that doesn't know somebody who has a positive COVID that really probably needs more than 5 days because either they have children or a spouse or a parent that has added days onto their actual exposure. So I, again, would support, if financially feasible, additional days. And I was also looking at 10.
Eric, and then Susan Fox.
Well, I'm not, so, I'm in a 2-teacher household, me and my wife. So I'm not so sure 5 extra days is enough. I would like to see a couple extra days, but I'd also like to see those extra days have flexibility being used for mental health days as well. I can speak from my own experience and say that, the reason I didn't go to the conference is because I can't. I just can't. I can't afford to take a day off. I can't because we don't have staff. So I'm down staff. You're down staff at where my wife teaches. She's subbing. I'm picking up any spare time I have is being picked up, helping out other places. So there is no extra time. And in 20 some plus years of teaching, I've never had this much time taken up just trying to keep the things afloat. I think it's that stressful. And I think all teachers are experiencing that, and we're doing everything we can. And, hey, what are we going to do? This is what we do. It's our livelihood. So I think whatever it is, maybe it's more realistic to do like 5 COVID days and 3 optional days, whether they're COVID days or they could also be used for mental health days as well. And look, I don't think teachers are going to take advantage of this. I think teachers are going to use it if they need it. And if they don't need it, they're not going to use it. It's a one-time thing. It's not going to carry over. It doesn't go, it doesn't go to the next year. The few teachers that probably use it are going to need it. They're going to need to use it. And if you have a teacher that needs a mental health day, they need that day. They're going to need it. And you'll have more teachers that are not going to use it. And so I don't think it's going to be something where any teacher is going to take advantage of it. But I think having that there for those times when they need it is really valuable and important. So I would support more days. I don't know if it has to be 5 extra days, but I would like to see some of those extra days be, have the flexibility being used for mental health as well. So.
Elizabeth, I'm going to ask a quick question because it
Yeah.
ties in with what they're saying. This is for Jared. Financially, how would that impact us if we did extra days outside of the 5? In addition to
So
the 5?
due to the shortage of subs, our sub budget is definitely tracking underneath. And on a normal basis, as Dan mentioned in his report on the operational and looking at, typically in January, we're at, 6%. I mean, and we're not filling. I mean, literally, we would be making, like, say, a weekly invoice payment to teachers on call close to $12,000 to $13,000, and I literally just processed one for $5,000. So that just shows you the reduction. Now, obviously, anytime a teacher subs for another teacher, they are getting compensated for that, and those are coming out of the sub budgets, but it's definitely not going to financially put us in burden if we did add that. I mean, I would agree that, teachers probably are not going to use it because that puts if they don't need to, that puts their peers in a situation. However, there are situations where, if someone does need a mental health day and someone else has to give up their prep time, that possibly creates another mental health issue internally. And just with the shortage of staff subs, it's very challenging for all of our staff. I mean, literally, our teachers are giving up their prep times to teach. It trickles down to educational assistants filling in for other educational assistants. I mean, literally every single time a teacher subs for another teacher, it affects payroll. I mean, I measured it today just to see. Typically, we get paper pay vouchers it's about an inch thick. We're up to 4 inches thick, and those are all individual keyed in things for our payroll person. So it definitely affects everybody across the district, and COVID has definitely put us all into that extra mental health stress. But overall, for a financial situation, I don't think it's going to affect us if we did add a few extra days.
Thank you. Elizabeth?
Yeah, thanks, Lorena. Thanks, Jared. I think a couple of things. One, I agree with Eric on 2 points. One, 8 for some reason feels like the right number of days. I have no absolute basis, logic, or reason for that, but it feels like the right amount. So take that for what it's worth, Nicole. It's very professional assessment there. I do want to underscore the mental health components of it. And I think Eric is onto something in terms of thinking about if the purpose of adding this leave is to mitigate COVID impact, right? And COVID harm. Some of that is because you got it. Some of that is because your kids' schools or daycares or whatever are closed as a result of it. And some of it is because you're burnt out. And I do think allowing for that potential level of flexibility is really interesting. So I'd like to kind of get your thoughts on that, Nicole. And Jared brings up a really good point around all the cross coverage that's been happening. And I understand its necessity. I understand that educators are some of the most selfless humans you will ever meet, right? I just want to help my colleagues. I just want to help my peers. And I think about other industries where they're just limits in the amount of time you're allowed to work, right? Pilots can only fly so many hours. Doctors can only work so many hours, right? Have we put in any systemic measures around you've covered too many classes, right? Take a pause, or something that kind of reinforces or tries to incentivize, yes, be helpful and useful to your colleagues, and also, you need to be helpful and useful to yourself as well. So kind of a related tangential HR point, Nicole.
Yeah, Elizabeth, I mean, I understand what you're saying, and it sounds a lot like giving our staff or helping them be empowered to set boundaries to protect themselves. And, we are all living in this state of burnout. And as to Jared's point, yes, I mean, if one staff member's out, it does create a coverage issue because, to be honest, most days we are very short-staffed in terms of our substitute pool. Like this week, it really has come down a lot, but there were a couple weeks ago when we were just in awe that we were able to keep our schools open, just with the amount of staff that were out. And, I think that this pandemic has really created an opportunity for us here to reassess what do these systems look like for us. And perhaps right now, a little bit of a time off might be able to help us, might be a little bit of a Band-Aid to help patch us through a little bit longer. But I think, we're going to have to take some big looks at, is the way that we program sustainable, for staff, for students? Do we need more planned breaks put in throughout the year to give people pauses all at the same time? So you're not coming in and okay, now we're short staff. I mean, I don't see that this substitute shortage or teacher shortage is going to be getting better anytime soon. I mean, people are not funneling into educator preparation programs. They're just not. And that's where a lot of our substitutes years ago came from, was individuals coming out of school who didn't have jobs, who were signing up to be subs to get their foot in the door. And that's just not happening. And so I think we are in a position where it is an opportunity, but it's we're going to need to get a lot of voices and a lot of people at the table to help us make the most of it and come up with some new options. So if a little bit of leave time right now gets us through, I mean, that's kind of where we're looking at this, but I think there's additional conversations to be had to be looking at this issue of burnout.
It does make me wonder, and this is more for you, Susan Fox, around the work of the personnel committee and whether or not, I know that a lot of it is, contractual kinds of things or whatever, but this feels like maybe a nice place to start some of that systemic look.
Right. Yeah, it certainly could be. I mean, we've finished the contractual things for this year, so there would be time to address some other things. I guess I had a couple things. One of the reasons we changed the wording for our personal leave policy, it used to be, at least theoretically, tied to if you had business to attend that you couldn't do during the normal workday. That was what under the old contract days, and that expectation continued with the new handbook. That in other words, if you had a house closing or there was some situation like that where you had to be in an appointment that couldn't be handled on a weekend, something like that, that's what that was for. It was not supposed to be vacation days. It was not necessarily supposed to be a mental health day. We changed the wording on that personal leave a few years ago because it used to be 2 days, and then for the third day, if you took a third day, you had to pay the cost of the sub or half the cost of a sub. We changed the personal leave policy to be 2 days with no reason given. And part of that was that argument about even in normal times, teachers sometimes hit a point where they need a mental health day. So I guess I feel like I wouldn't want to add days and then try to make some distinction between real COVID versus mental. I guess I just wouldn't, I think that's too challenging to do. I'm still in favor of adding some days, but I'd rather have teachers use those. And then they do have those personal leave days that, that people could take, and not everybody takes those. And, when that was first used, for the same reasons that the substitute issue is always a problem. The other thing I wanted to clarify was when Susan was giving that scenario, my understanding is if someone's fully vaccinated and they're exposed, close contact, but they test negative, they don't need to quarantine, right? They just wear the mask and keep coming, right? That was my understanding. So I wanted to make sure I understood that. So that's the other reason for this change. The whole quarantine situation has changed. So it's really only if they test positive and they have to stay home, but you can still have that piling up with one. I mean, I have, relatives who've dealt with this. A child brought it home from school, went through the whole family, and it was like one after the other, boom, boom, boom. Others where one person had it, nobody else did get it. So it's hard to tell. But yeah, I guess I'm still in support of adding some days here.
Elizabeth?
Just to clarify, I'm also in agreement with you, Susan. I don't think bucketing them into separate things makes sense. I'm just wondering about if we widen the definition around what we mean by COVID impacted. So it wasn't just I was exposed or my kid was exposed, or, there's kind of a list of approved COVID leaves. And I think there might be an opportunity to expand the definition of COVID impacted.
Yeah, I feel like that's going down a little bit of a slippery slope. I'm not sure. I mean, I do feel like we have other leave that people can take, so I just think that's becomes a hard thing to judge, and I'm not sure I'd be interested in going there. Is my first response.
I don't think you need to worry about judging it. I just don't. I don't think that's an issue.
Well, right. No, but no, because people aren't going to take it is the main thing, I guess. Sorry. I mean, I certainly tried hard never to be absent because it was always way more work than,
Yeah, it's
not
more
only
work.
thinking of your colleagues, it's way more work to be absent than to be there many times, but yeah.
I
Well,
think Dan
again,
wants to share.
And I think most of you know this, but I just want to make sure that we're all clear, you know, and I agree with everything that's been stated, and the average, you know, and that's a poor word, for many teachers and other, you know, support staff members, the sick leave that is given each year, you know, in a typical year, you don't need all those days. But then when you do have a serious illness, you know, yourself or family, of course, that's why we, you know, have the accumulation. And as you know, for our younger or, you know, less experienced people, it takes a while to accumulate those. So for the vast majority of our employees have enough sick leave. But it's, so this is just, so, you know, you're not burning into those banks as much, but when you really do need it, that's where it becomes a crisis, you know, situation, you know. So we already have a lot of flexibility. As Susan mentioned, the personal leave, even our current regular sick leave can be used for a mental health day. So it's not a matter of not having leave. It's just a matter of trying to have this additional so that, you know, because of, people are using more this year, and that the long-term effect is going to be when you really have that, you know, other things and you run out. So I think you all know that, but I just wanted to be clear that that's the purpose. It's really not a cost thing, like Jared said. It's just, you know, a different type of leave so that they don't lose that bank when they really need it.
Okay, Dan. Susan Manning.
Yeah, actually, Dan, I think you've done a really good job with this. And I think here's what the language says. Employees are eligible for up to 5 non-cumulative COVID-19 leave days with pay during the 2020-22 year. I would like to change that to 10. Then it goes on to say this leave may, not shall, may be used for COVID-19 related absences, including, and then it lists things, COVID infection, time off waiting, self-quarantine due to care for child, and or care for immediately family member. It says including these things, it does not say excluding. So I appreciate the comments that the other board members have made about mental health. And I think this language is written well enough to very simply take a position that there are a lot of things related to COVID. And I think we should include that. I think we should increase this to 10 days and leave the language as it is, because I think it's broad enough to include some of the things we've been discussing.
Susan Fox.
Well, from a policy standpoint, I'm not sure I agree with that. I think when it says including, it means that list. If it said including but not limited to, it might be other things. But then I'm not sure, you know, about, I don't know. I guess I like it the way it is. I'd probably go to 10. If other people want to go to 8, I'd go to 8. But I guess I think the way it's written is very clear. And I think the more you muddy the language, the harder it gets to be functional. And I think it's well done the way it is.
Eric.
Or we could just treat our teachers like the professionals they are and trust that if they say they need a day off, that they need a day off, and not put all these restrictions on what it is. I mean, can we just finally recognize teachers and the staff in our buildings that work with our most valuable resource that we all have, which is our children, and realize that they all want to be there, and that if they need to take a day off, they need to take a day off, and not have all these criteria for it. I never understood that to begin with.
Well, and I think we do that. We currently do that. That's what I was saying with the personal leave and the current sick leave. So I guess that's our only difference of opinion. I feel like we do provide that already. And so this to me is a little different, but that's just so I guess I'll see what other people think about that.
Peter?
Want to recognize the difficulty of the situation, the importance of the treating our teachers. I mean, helping them deal with the situation, the circumstances that we're in. And they're also, I mean, if we were flush with substitutes, then I think this would be different. But we understand that it's a difficult for everything. So I don't know what the right answer is, and I support this additional COVID leave. I don't know what the language is written. I'm not sure if we should extend it. I'm struggling with that. I don't know what I don't have a good information to understand what the right days are. It was suggested we talk about, Nicole, I think, very presciently suggested that we talk about how we structure, how we do this. And I would suggest that we are going to talk at the end of the meeting of our strategic planning exercise, and a place where some of this belongs is that we need to, in the strategic plan, say that we're going to think about addressing some of these issues and thinking about how we do things long term. But that's the place for me.
Yeah, I'm kind of on the lines of Peter, where I support this leave, but any additional days, I don't have enough information to suggest how many days extra.
Yeah, I'm with you, Lorraine. I think everything is set in stone. We should go ahead and just move approval.
Susan Fox?
I move approval of the teacher and support staff handbook revisions for section 8.06 COVID-19 leave, amended to include up to 8 non-cumulative days instead of 5.
Second.
Otherwise as presented.
Second.
All right, any further discussion? Okay, roll call vote. Susan Manning? Oh,
Aye.
Eric?
Aye.
Andrew?
Aye.
Elizabeth?
Aye.
Peter?
Aye.
Lorraine? Oh, I'm sorry, Susan Fox. I missed you.
That's okay. Aye.
Lorraine, aye. Ayes have it. Motion is carried.
Lorraine, I would just also like to mention that I think at some time, depending, and maybe it should just come from personnel. I really continue to support the 10 days, just because when you look at the situational issues, that seems to cover the issues better, but 8 is better than 5. But I would hope that personnel and maybe administration would consider the additional 2 days at some point. And maybe Dan wants to come back with us and say, we're not going to consider the additional 2 days at this time. But it would be helpful to know that this is a continuing discussion somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, we could certainly talk about it more in person. I
That'd
just
great.
decided
That'd be
based on other people's comments to sort of split the difference and compromise. So that was the reason I moved the way I did. So
I appreciated that. I thought that felt right.
yeah, it was right in the middle. That seemed like people were kind of in the middle. So I thought, okay. But because as you say, there's no magic number, and I don't know exactly what the rate. We can also see how it's going, and if we feel the need to come back and do something.
Okay, thank you. All right, next are discussion items, strategic planning process.
Okay, so you may recall we had a board workshop in November where we discussed, the process that we had in place for the last strategic plan, what we liked about it, and I think we had pretty clear consensus that evening about how we might want to move forward. And then since that time, I've had some email correspondence and some written things we shared, but we haven't had any discussion about it, as a group. And so I just wanted to give an opportunity before we move on in this next planning stage to share with you kind of where we're at and give you an opportunity for some input before we move any further. So The information that's on board docs was shared with you back in December. I had engaged Joe Schrader as a facilitator when we talked through the things that were important to the board, with the idea of not starting over, just looking at perhaps updating what we have in place for goals. We want to have voice from our stakeholders by using focus groups and listening sessions. And he was totally aligned with that. In fact, has used that strategy many times as a facilitator with the planning process. So the one thing, though, that we put out there tentatively is that we still need a group of people to come together and actually put it in writing and do the work. And we had suggested to do that over 2 to 2.5 days. And there was some concern legitimately as well about, when you do an all-day thing, about the availability of people, to be able to have a whole day. And so Joe and I had a little bit of a conversation about, well, if it's really reworking the old plan, how much time do we really need? And I have a call scheduled with them for this Friday. And so I wanted to share with you my thoughts and get your feedback on that I would like to try to work with them to really put more of that emphasis on the focus groups and then the large group to get that down to one weekend and eliminate perhaps that March 25th day. So we only have a Friday and Saturday morning to actually, do the work of pulling it together. Just because I'm not sure, that we need that much time. And again, the availability of people is going to make it that much more difficult to find people that can take that kind of time to do so. So I'm interested in your thoughts about that. And then the other thing we need to work through is your, as board as a whole, your how you're going to work. And I'm going to suggest that we probably, before we get into these phases, that we have Joe meet with you in a workshop to be able to talk through and finalize some of these pieces of the process together as well.
Okay, Susan Manning.
Dan, I really appreciate it. I think, again, as soon as I saw the schedule, I saw the March 25th, and that's actually the Friday before spring break for the school district. And many families leave. And if we're going to include the community and family members, to try and schedule on the 25th. So I greatly appreciate that you're exploring other ways to put the time in without using that day. I just think you're going to change the whole dynamics by using that particular day as a full day. So I appreciate your work on that.
Okay. Any other questions?
Okay, so next steps then is confirm, and I'm pretty confident that Joe's going to be agreeable that, yeah, we can get this done. And then I'd like to schedule a time, perhaps. It also gives us an extra month, to be honest. I mean, we've, with what we've been experiencing here in January, we're a little behind where we wanted to be as far as pulling, some of the background information together. So, so I just want to be fully, honest about that as well, that we could use the extra time. But the next step that I would like to do is schedule a workshop with the full board and Joe, perhaps end of February, very beginning of March, before we get into this actual process, that to make sure we're 100% on the same page about how we're going to move forward.
Eric?
I just got a quick question, Dan. I assume Joel's getting paid for this. Joe is getting paid for this, correct?
Correct.
How much is he getting paid?
I'll be glad to share that. I think I know what the amount is. I want to look that up and get it accurate. So I'll make sure I share that out.
Yeah, as long as you share it in with some public meeting, just so I would like that.
Yeah. So it's under the threshold that, needs board approval, but yeah, absolutely. I'll get that for you.
Susan Manning?
Yeah, Dan, I just wanted to clarify. I had seen somewhere, I thought I did, that you were trying to schedule a special board meeting for February 2nd. Is that correct?
Yeah, when we come up to the meeting dates, that was what we're going to be talking about next, but that's not for this purpose.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify because I hadn't gotten anything asking for availability, I didn't think. So your thought about the meeting for the strategic plan with the board would be what, later in February?
Correct.
Okay. So you do what you usually do when you'd send out several dates and see what board attendance is, could be for that?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I was just a little surprised when I saw the other one too and hadn't heard anything. That's great. Thank you.
Right. Dan, did you have any other information?
Yeah, I just was looking up at the contract here. So the $9,600 plus expenses.
He's getting paid $9,600.
Correct.
Okay. I don't think we need him, but if other board members think we do, then it's fine.
We need him, Eric.
I absolutely think we do. Yes.
We need him. We need
For
him.
For $9,600?
Yes, which
Yes.
I'm going to be honest with you, Eric, for an external consultant is actually not that expensive.
That is.
I
not
know
that-
it. I know
thought
it
was gonna
feels
be-
big.
I'm just telling you my opinion. I don't think we need him. So if
I
you-
hear-
if
I
everybody
hear
else
you.
does, that's fine.
I hear you. And I'm going to say we need him, and we would have needed him even prior to COVID. But given all the other things that our administrators need to attend to, if all he does is keep it on the tracks, right, so that we can get it done and get moving in terms of making really good goals, it'll be worth it.
Elizabeth, I don't know. You've been on the board long enough to know that we're always on the track. We never go off the track.
Never off the rails. You're right.
Well, yeah.
I just wanted to add, I'm sorry, Susan, really quick.
The facilitation is well worth it. I mean, it's not just keeping us on track, it's facilitating.
I'll facilitate it for half the amount.
Yeah, well, sorry, no thanks.
Andrew and I went to
The conflict of interest.
booth. We went to a booth that we're talking about strategic planning, and their starting rates was $150,000. So I think this is.
And I also would add, for those board members who attended, and again, we're going to have to talk about that because what was that, Dan? Were there 2 board members that were allowed to participate on the strategic planning before? But again, the community involvement, all of that was great. But it was critical to be able to have somebody who had no conflict of interest, no direct connection, and was knowledgeable in this process and procedure. Doing no children in the school district, again, those little threads of conflict of interest, and to help you move forward with your thoughts. It made all the difference in the building of the strategic plan that we did before. And we need a facilitator who has the skill set.
Eric, you're outnumbered.
Oh, that's fine. My opinion is not going to change, and it'll be fine. But I'm just, that's what I think.
All right. Dan, any other information you wanted to share?
I think that's it for that process.
Okay, sounds good. All right, next are the future meeting dates. And then Dan, I'll let you share about the February 2nd.
So normally I would get an email out, and so I know this is kind of short notice, and so if this date doesn't work, we can find another one. But we do need to schedule a check-in meeting as part of the evaluation process, and so I wanted to suggest a week from now, next week Wednesday the 2nd, to check on your availability for a special meeting. It does not have to be at 5 o'clock either. It can be whatever time is most convenient, but sometimes we've tried to do the workshops a little bit earlier, or special meetings. And the other thing we should talk about is whether, we want to consider that being an in-person versus, virtual. And if it's more convenient, we can certainly do the virtual. Sometimes it is better to be able to, in this situation. So I guess let's start with the date. Is the date your availability for next week, Wednesday?
Susan Manning?
I'm available and I would support the virtual. And I continue to support that based on the virulency of the Omicron virus. The other, and we've been able to do the board work together pretty well. So I'm pretty comfortable with that.
Okay, thank you. Elizabeth?
I cannot do the second at 5. I could do it if we met at 6:30 or our normal time 7, but I can't make 5. I prefer in person always, but obviously we'll defer to the majority.
Susan Fox?
Anytime works for me. For that kind of workshop, I prefer in person. But again, I'll go with what the majority is. And the time doesn't matter to me at all. So 6:30 is as good as 5 for me. But maybe better. I'm not nuts about the 5 o'clock times. I do, always willing to do it, but whatever.
For me, I would prefer the 6 o'clock time, and I'm flexible either in person or virtual. Peter?
Yeah, I can do that. I'm flexible. I think I prefer virtual, but I'm flexible.
Eric?
Definitely prefer in person. I have to say I'm flexible, even though I'm not. I'd rather not.
What about the time?
The time's fine for me.
Let the minutes reflect.
Andrew?
Well, I'm flexible for both virtual or in person, but it's Black History Month, McKinney Love Day, my anniversary. I mean, all kind of stuff is going on. So February is just a busy month for me, but I'm gonna squeeze this in though somehow.
So if we do the second, then since Elizabeth actually can't come earlier, and I thought I heard you say 6:30 be the earliest, or 6.
If we're meeting virtually, 6:30 will be the earliest. If we're going to meet in person, I would prefer like a 6:45 or 7, which I know might be too late for you all, but I have kids stuff. I'm coming from Wanakee.
Right, okay. I'm okay with either time. Like, I guess so the next question, in person or virtual?
Well, can I suggest this? Okay, we're meeting here in January. We'll be meeting again. Maybe this one we do virtual with the goal in the spring, the next one to do it in person.
That works for me. And then 6:30 works fine.
Yeah, okay.
All right.
Okay, 6:30. All right, I'll confirm everything. The invite email too.
Thank you for your flexibility, everyone, especially Eric.
I
All right, and then our next board meeting is February 9th at 7 o'clock. All right, and can I have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Second.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Bye.
All right, well, motion is carried. Have a great night, everyone.
bye.
Bye.
Have a good one.